Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 100 of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Man, with that many episodes, I think we might have covered all the lands in a second darkness.
Unless some strange chance deliver us that our eyes cannot see. Folks, we'll head on over to the common room in just a moment, but first, I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the Man of the West, who has not used a ring to do crooked and malicious things that we know of, Alan Sisto.
Well, thank you, Sean. I see your status as co-host has given you power according to your stature. Folks, today we finally learn more of the history behind the One Ring, and we spent some time with that charming fellow, Sméagol.
Well, personally, I always preferred the company of Deagle, but he can't join us tonight.
He's a little choked up.
Oh.
That's too bad. You know, he does give the best birthday presents after all, even if he's a little reluctant.
Yeah, you really...
That was awful, man. That's just terrible.
That was terrible. That was really terrible. And I was trying to come up with something to give you back, but
no, I think we're done.
Yeah, I think so. Well, speaking of birthdays, we're celebrating a milestone of sorts.
We are
100 episodes.
Man, that really is hard to believe, Sean. I never thought we'd get to 100. When that first episode released back in February of 2016, we genuinely thought we'd be talking into the void. Hi, Melkor. And that very few folks would enjoy our offbeat brand of humor and textual analysis.
That's what we thought, but apparently they do enjoy it. We managed to hit 10,000 downloads in our first 6 months, but we get that many in a single week now. So who knew?
I know. It's crazy. Manway, I'd guess. Well, of course, Mandos. I mean, after all, he knows all things that shall be, save only those that lie still in the freedom of the Luvatar.
Well, yeah, there's that. So anyway, folks, aside from this little brief celebration, we're not going to make a huge deal of our 100th episode because we're going to be making a much bigger deal for our 111st episode coming up.
That's right.
So stick around for a reminder about how you can take part in that.
Yep.
But in the meantime, Alan, I understand you were given a small birthday gift while you were at Oxonmoot.
That's right, though it wasn't my birthday.
It was a Bilbo's birthday gift.
That's right. Well, Shaun Gunner, the chair of the Tolkien Society, was still kind enough to sit down with me for a great conversation. Maybe I told him it was my birthday. I don't remember. It's entirely possible. Anyway, we chatted.
It's my birthday, Precious, and I want it. I want a conversation with you, Precious.
I don't think he would have sat down with me if I approached him from that angle. I just don't think so.
Probably not. No.
He
would have backed away slowly.
Yeah, maybe not even slowly. I think
quickly.
He might have, thrown somebody in front of him to protect himself from me. I don't know. Maybe he would have grabbed John Garth and put him in. Talk to him. Which I would have done gladly, by the way, but he was so busy at Oxonmoot getting ready for his talk and everything. So anyway, sat down with Shaun Gunner and we chatted about Oxonmoot itself. We talked about the incredible organization that is the Tolkien Society. And we talked a great deal about next year's once-in-a-lifetime Tolkien gathering, Tolkien 2019.
And I am really looking forward to listening to this since I couldn't be with you in Oxford. So why don't we, I don't know, what do we do? Do we have like a tape recorder thingamajig we fire up or what?
Well, yeah, reel-to-reel is what I used.
Yeah.
Unlike Tolkien, Mr. Gunner did not feel it necessary to exorcise demons from my recording device. So here we go. So I'm here at Oxonmoot 2018 with Shaun Gunner, the chair of the Tolkien Society, the incredibly young chair of the Tolkien Society. We'll get to that in a minute, but we are in the middle of Oxonmoot itself. We've had a couple of days or day and a half here of talks. We've had some more events, and we've still got a little bit to go, but I finally was able to get a few minutes to sit down with Shaun. Shaun, why don't you say hi to our audience for us today?
Hello, everybody. As Alan says, great to sit down and chat. We've had a very, very busy weekend. It always is at Oxonmoot.
Yeah.
Particularly the largest one we've ever had.
How many people are here?
Just under 300 in total.
Wow.
I remember a couple of years ago we had an Oxonmoot that had 107. So they're getting
triple growth in just a few years.
They're getting quite a bit bigger. But yeah, it's been a good weekend.
And are they getting bigger in terms of paper presentations and speaking and all?
They are. Yep. So because we've had two days of 2 streams of talks. Again, a few years ago we'd had 1 day of 1 stream of talks. Okay. So that's quadrupled really in a few years.
So let me ask you a little bit about the society itself. So most of our listeners are Americans, and I suspect many of them don't know what the Tolkien Society does. That is to say, they don't know why they should join the Tolkien Society. Now, Shaun and I, as the hosts of the Prancing Pony podcast, have to do our part. We are both members of the Tolkien Society.
Excellent.
But tell our listeners a little bit about it and why they should join.
Well, the Tolkien Society was founded in 1969 by a woman called Vera Chapman, and the Society was founded in order just to promote Tolkien's works and promote what the Society believes is the messages of Tolkien's works.
Okay.
Over the years, we've become an educational charity registered in the United Kingdom, and what we aim to do is promote Tolkien throughout the media, throughout the public, and research into Tolkien's works as well. So for that, members of the Society get 6 of our Ammon Hens a year, which is our bi-monthly bulletin. They get an annual journal Malorn, they get discount to our events, such as Oxonmoot and Tolkien 2019 next year. But what most of our members, the reason why most of our members join the Society is because they believe in our mission. They believe that the Tolkien Society represents Tolkien fans and we do the very best work to make sure we get Tolkien in the press and get the right messages out there about Tolkien. You know, we're not interested in the films. I mean, there's lots of members of the Society who love the films, and that's great.
Yeah, the Society is not an anti-film.
No, not at all.
group.
Not at all.
We've got Facebook groups for that.
Yeah, and I love the Lord of the Rings films by Peter Jackson.
Absolutely.
But what we're there to do is, when journalists want to write about Tolkien, we're there to make sure we get the answers in there.
The right answers, the Tolkien answers,
right
not the
answers.
Jackson answers.
And that's one of the reasons why I guess a lot of your listeners would have seen that there was the Newsweek special that came out about a month or so ago.
Absolutely.
In which I contributed in order to make sure that we got the right messages in there about Tolkien.
And that was an excellent piece.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, I mentioned earlier that you were the very young chair of the Tolkien Society.
I am,
so
yes.
That, of course, means that you were really kind of coming of age, so to speak, as the films came out. I mean, was that your introduction to Tolkien, or had you already been a reader?
To a certain extent, yes. So I came across the David Rensel's, illustrated Hobbit when I was about 7 or 8, and it didn't really do anything for me, actually.
Fair enough.
But when in 2001, Fellowship of the Ring came out, and I saw the trailers for it, and I was 13 at the time, and I thought, this looks pretty cool, this film.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read the book. And then I thought the book was even cooler than the film.
Good for you.
So then obviously I read The Hobbit, Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, History of Middle-earth. In the space of about 2 years, I just went through everything.
Wow.
Yeah, so by the time I was sort of 16, I had read pretty much everything that was out by that point.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the Society when I was 17, so I went to my first Oxonmoot in 2005.
Okay.
And that year, the Society also held a huge event called Tolkien 2005.
Yes.
I went to that as well. That had about 700 people there.
Yeah. That's the one that the proceedings are the big green volumes that are humongous.
That's it, yeah.
I've got a set of those on my shelf.
So many talks and papers that was delivered at that event.
Fantastic.
So yeah, that was really my introduction to Tolkien and into the Society.
Now, really perfect timing, really.
And the Society, I'm not going to lie, in the past it has really struggled with how does it react to the films, how does it react to people who join the Society because of the films.
Right.
Actually, we've really moved on beyond that now.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we don't. It's not an issue anymore.
No.
And actually, we're welcoming for everybody. You've probably seen this weekend, whether you're into films or games or art or languages, geography, history, biography, whatever it is in Tolkien's world and the world of scholarship around his stuff and the world of fandom. It's here.
Yeah, exactly.
It's on offer within the
Society. And I'm glad you say
Society.
fandom as well, because it is both academic and layperson.
Yes,
in terms
absolutely.
of being welcome. Even the talks that I've heard have
and where
a big
we,
range.
Although we are an educational charity, and it's important that the work that we do is educational and promotes research into Tolkien, we are very keen to ensure that actually that fandom is represented as well.
Yeah.
That's why you see the artwork on display and people creating costumes from the books.
That was wonderful.
It's beautiful, and people writing songs and poetry, and that has to be serviced as well, because that becomes part of the cultural heritage around Tolkien.
Well, just as Tolkien was a creator,
Yep.
we are creators. We're inspired by him as well, and so whatever our mode of creation may be, from an audio podcast to a doctoral thesis to a painting, it's all represented here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And since I became chair, I've been chair since 2013. I was 24 when I first became the chair.
Now, how did that happen? Just real briefly, because I know we're running out of time. But how has solid and staid organization such as the Tolkien Society decide to bring in as its leader a very young man? What was your involvement? What made you decide? I think I can raise my hand and go for that.
Probably stupidity on my part.
A little Fëanorian overconfidence, maybe.
So because I joined the board of the society because we have a board of trustees, of which I'm the chair of the board.
Right.
I joined the board when I was 22, I think.
Okay.
And it was really because I'd been a member for, by this point, I'd been a member for 5 years.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I knew a couple of people on the board already, and they'd said to me, you've got opinions, you've got views.
So you weren't quiet then, you've only just now gotten loud and
No. I always
opinionated?
had opinions about how the direction of the society. And I sort of said, I had a chat to a couple of them, and they were like, well, we got a bit of a vacancy, why don't you come on board? And I did. And it quickly transpired that in the space of about 18 months, I gathered a lot of jobs. I was doing a lot of things really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And then Chair Sally, who's now in charge of Oxonmoot, she said we had a big event in 2012, Return of the Ring, where Corey was there, for instance, and we had a huge range of guests. And Sally said at that event, this would be kind of her last. She was going to be planning on standing down as chair. And I sort of thought to myself, maybe I should go for it. There's quite a lot of people who've been here a lot longer, like literally
maybe longer than you have been alive.
Decades longer than me, who might go for it. But quite a few people said to me they thought that I had the vision of where the society needed to go, thought that I had the leadership skills required. I put my name forward, and you get elected annually by the membership at the AGM, and I've been elected now 6 times in a row for six years. So this is my 6th year now.
Very good.
As chair of the society.
Well, I'm sure that all of us appreciate what you've done. I know you said at the newcomers meeting that you don't really do much. You just say you do your job, you do your job, and you do your job, and then you leave. But I suspect it's a little more than that.
Yeah, I do. I mean, one of the important things for me is fundamentally I work in communications. Yeah. And it's really important to me.
So you're really an outward-facing. You're the person who interfaces with the media.
I am, yeah, and that's probably the way every chair does the job differently, and that's how I do the job. I do the job as a public-facing spokesman for the society, and what I'm really pleased about is, in my time, we've reformed a lot of our publications, we've reformed our online presence, we've completely changed our website, we've changed Oxonmoot completely as an event, actually, from the way it was 5 years ago, and our membership has gone from around 600, which it was in early 2014. To being 1,700 today.
That's excellent.
And it's going to keep on going and going. And I'm really pleased the fact that a day will come when I stand down. And I'll be pretty confident that I'm leaving the society in a much better state than when I arrived at. And that's the thing that I really makes me really proud, is actually the society is in a really strong position. There was a time when people in the Tolkien community would Google the Tolkien Society and not always like the stuff that they saw online. And that made me really sad. That hurt. Because I know that when you come to these events, that is not the experience people get. This is fantastic. But now that's completely gone. I work really hard on Facebook and Twitter to make sure that we get our message out there. We're verified on Twitter, which was really kind of them. And we've got, I think, about 55,000 followers.
Oh, wow.
And similar number on Twitter. Our reach last year was many millions that we know who visited our website, who saw us through Twitter and Facebook.
The challenge is to get them to become members, to become a part of the organization.
That is the challenge, actually.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that, how do you get someone tipping over? Look, we know if you literally type Tolkien into Google, we're like the second result. Yeah. Right, and we get that. You get the Tolkien estate, then you get us, then you get Wikipedia, then you get the Tolkien Gateway, and then a load of other ones, right?
Right.
And we know that most people come to us, and because they're just they're just normal members of the public, and they want to know what year did Tolkien die. There's some bits of trivia, and we've got all of that information.
Of course,
so we know that most people are not kind of our target audience. So we get that, we do understand that, but we know that there's a good number of people who are our target audience, and we are the fact that our membership numbers, we're growing by about 200 members a year now.
Excellent.
And that's probably us.
Hopefully you'll have another bump now. We certainly strongly recommend membership in the Tolkien Society.
Hopefully we're continuing to sort of chip away at those people, just nudging them over, just want to tip them over into becoming members. One of the things that I was really proud of, you probably saw about a month ago, we put the almost the entire back catalogue of the Society's publications, going all the way back to the early 1970s.
That was spectacular, because as somebody who's only been a member for a handful of years, trying to gain access to that information was not there. Now I can.
Yeah, it was one of the number one things that people would contact us about.
Yeah,
they say,
back issues.
There's this that literally there's an article by Christopher Tolkien in Malorn number 12. How can I get hold of it?
Yeah.
And I would say, well, you can't really, because it's out of print, and when it was printed, it was in files that we can't really use now.
Right.
So you're going to have to probably find
it's probably like a Quark or something like that.
You're going to find either a bootleg PDF from somewhere, which there were some around at one point, but I've not seen them around, or you have to get one second hand.
And you were able to now convert them all.
Everybody has full access to some of those early Malorns. They've got poems by Tolkien in them. Yeah. They've got articles by Christopher Tolkien, Priscilla Tolkien, letters from Tolkien in them. There's some really important stuff about that.
Really worth looking through.
Yeah. It's worth remembering that before Tolkien died, our founder, Vera Chapman, she met Tolkien at a party. Yeah. And she said to him, I'm Vera Chapman. I've set up the Tolkien Society. Will you be our president? And he said yes.
Yeah.
We had from the man himself, sort of,
gave the imprimatur of
gave the society the nod of approval, as it were. And that's,
and his family's continued to do so. Christopher Tolkien and Priscilla Tolkien.
Christopher Tolkien came to our '92 conference. Priscilla Tolkien's our vice president, been involved for many years. We've had Michael Tolkien and his dad, Michael Tolkien. Yeah. Had Roy Tolkien, Simon Tolkien, Joanna Tolkien, all come to our events.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, when there was the opening of the exhibition in Oxford. Yeah, at the exhibition earlier this year, I was there. Lots of Tolkien family members were there. Lots of Tolkien scholars were there, and I saw Roy Tolkien. And I was like, "How you doing, Roy? Come to Oxonmoot this year." And he's like, "Oh, I'd love to, but I'm busy." But I'm sure we'll see them and other Tolkien family members at more of our events, because that's what the Tolkien Society is about. Is promoting Tolkien, the man, not Tolkien the myth, right? Tolkien the man, and the works that he produced, that he spent his life working on.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I know that we're running short on time. I wanted to ask you one more question. Tell us a little bit about the big project next year, Tolkien 2019 in Birmingham.
So Tolkien 2019 is to celebrate our 50th birthday. So we are essentially holding a huge birthday party for ourselves.
A party of special magnificence, I imagine.
It is a party of special. I was hoping to convince someone to hold a surprise birthday party for us. I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Well, we want more than 144 guests too.
We do want. We've already got more than that as things stand.
I better book my ticket now.
So it takes place for 5 days. Over 5
days.
Yep. So it starts on a Wednesday. Actually, many people probably arrive on the Tuesday and ends on the Sunday. We've booked out an entire hotel in central Birmingham. We've got Brian Sibley, Tom Shippey, Alan Lee, Ted Naismith, Wayne Hammond, Christina Scull coming, and John Garth as well. We've got this huge list of academics, and we're going to be announcing over the coming weeks a lot of the activities that are taking place. It will make Oxonmoot look like a children's tea party in comparison. The size and scale of this event. So one of the highlights we've got is we have an orchestra who are coming along to play music from the films and music from Donald Swan's adaptation as well. Yes. And we also have, you may have seen in the UK, there was a stage production of Leaf by Niggle. Yes. And they're going to be coming along and presenting it specifically for us.
Oh, that is going to be wonderful. I know so many of our listeners wanted to see that, but couldn't make the trip to come over here.
No, so he's going to be doing an exclusive performance for us, coming down, because it's in the middle of another run. He's doing another performance of something else at that exact time, but he's breaking it to come and see us to do that.
Very good.
And then we've also got a ceilidh, which is your type of Scottish dance that's going to be organised, and as well there's going to be a banquet there as well that people are going to take part in. So it's a spectacular event. You've probably seen the proceedings of the 2005 and 2012 events. The scale of those, it's bigger than that.
It's much bigger.
It's much bigger than that. We don't really know how many people are going to come. At the moment, we know it's minimum 500.
Sure.
We have capacity really to go up to about 1,000.
That's what I was about to ask next.
Yeah, up to about 1,000.
I bet she'll sell out.
I don't know. I don't want to overblow it.
Don't jinx it, but
don't jinx it.
700 or 800.
I suspect we're going to be in the middle of that range. I think 6, 7, maybe even 800.
That would be a roaring success.
And also, probably make for one of the largest, dedicated Tolkien conferences there have ever been.
Certainly.
In all of history. It'd be spectacular.
Yeah.
And the collection of academics and the collection of members, collection of fans, of artwork, all there in one place. You may probably never see the like of which ever again.
Yeah.
So you have
unless
to be there.
Unless you're so young that you can also make the 100th anniversary in 50 more years. So, folks, you've heard it here. You've got to find a way to come to Tolkien 2019. And I'll tell you this, we're still working out the details, but Shaun and I are planning on being there. And we are hoping, though we have not yet been able to work out the details, we're hoping that we will be able to do for Tolkien 2019 what we did for Mythmoot 5. Host an episode there, or record an episode there. It wouldn't be streamed live necessarily, but we would be recording it live, interviewing at least some of the guests, and giving that to you as an experience for you who can't make it. But for those of you who can, find a way. If this is your only trip to the UK in your entire lives, make it next August in Birmingham. Well, Shaun, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. And again, good luck next year. Can't wait to see it.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you there.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Well, that was awesome, Alan. Thank you so much for capturing that while you were there.
My
for
pleasure.
Me and for the others who couldn't be there.
Yeah.
Shaun sounds like a fun guy to talk to, which you
as all
expect
Shauns are.
From a guy named Shaun. Exactly.
That's
I
right.
was going there myself. And man, it is. I tell you, it's amazing what he's been able to do for the Tolkien Society. And
Yeah.
I mean, that membership growth he talked about, that's astonishing for such a short time.
Really is.
And I will say, I heard you say this. I'm a newish member also in the last few years myself. And I will say that the rewards of membership, I mean, just the annual Malorn and all the online back issues of that.
Oh, that alone.
Well worth the cost, even for us here in the States. I would highly recommend membership for all of our listeners.
Yeah. Even the digital membership, which is a little less expensive. I think you get it
In the post
by
room,
airmail, right? Yeah, I know I do too.
Yeah, I
And
do.
that's-
Yeah, I get.
I
the
like
paper
holding
one.
it in my hand, and
Yeah,
there's
I do
there's
too.
a price for that. But you can get the digital membership. It's a little less.
For
and
cheaper because
still
you don't have
get-
to pay the postage.
That's
yeah.
right. And you still get the access to all those online issues, including the back ones. And there's some amazing gems
Yeah,
in those
there
back
really
issues.
is.
What a fun time to explore that stuff.
There really is. It's truly worth it. And plus, you just get the great community that goes with it.
Yeah, huge.
And you also get a discount on Tolkien 2019, which is a long expected party I'm looking forward to.
Absolutely. More on that at the end of the show, too. So stick around for some very big news, folks. All right, then, let's go ahead and get on with the second part of the Shadow of the Past.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, we're going to dive right back in just after we ended the last section in the first episode on this chapter. I'll go ahead and pick that up, and we'll go from there. But last night I told you of Sauron the Great, the Dark Lord. The rumors that you have heard are true. He has indeed arisen again, and left his hold in Mirkwood, and returned to his ancient fastness in the Dark Tower of Mordor. That name even you hobbits have heard of, like a shadow on the borders of old stories. Always after a defeat and a respite, the shadow takes another shape and grows again. I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And already, Frodo, our time is beginning to look black. The enemy is fast becoming very strong. His plans are far from ripe, I think, but they are ripening. We shall be hard put to it. We should be very hard put to it, even if it were not for this dreadful chance. The enemy still lacks one thing to give him strength and knowledge, to beat down all resistance, break the last defenses, and cover all the lands in a second darkness. He lacks the One Ring.
But he jumps right in, doesn't he?
He sure does. Yeah,
You know.
he cuts absolutely lays it out on the line right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My
I mean,
goodness.
no time to go back because there's just way too much there.
Yeah.
To go back and tell the whole tale. But
Yeah. We didn't read that part, but you're right, because, well, I
Right.
can't go back that far.
right.
It would take us all the way all the way into winter from spring. Here we are in spring. We talked about that last episode. He's remembering that April morning, and he's no, it would take us all the way into the winter if we did that.
Months and months to tell that whole story.
Yeah, that's a long tale. So he tells us the short version, the Reader's Digest version, and it's pretty terrifying enough, frankly.
Yeah, it really is. And we get the first appearance of the name of Sauron. Sauron the Great, the Dark Lord. We talked a little bit about the meaning of that name last time. We also talked about the way that, we get a direct connection, or I guess a very clear connection, that he was the power that left Mirkwood.
Exactly.
That he was the necromancer in Mirkwood. And that this is, sort of kind of Tolkien connecting back to the previous story, to the Hobbit story. And also setting up what's going to happen in this story, going back to the Dark Tower in Mordor.
A name that even the hobbits know. The sheltered hobbits who live that life that, they don't even think of anything outside their borders. They've actually heard of Mordor.
Yeah, that's right. A shadow on the borders of old stories. That's really cool. It's like it's like, fairy tale come to life, except it's not fairy tale. It's, it's a horror story come to life.
Absolutely. It's here there be monsters, it's the the unexplored areas
exactly,
of the map.
The edge of the map. Exactly. Yeah. That's a good point.
My goodness.
And Frodo's just simple statement, just this simple wish that he just wishes it had been different. He wishes that it need not have happened in his time.
And who wouldn't wish that? I mean, Gandalf completely understands. He shares that same desire. I wish it hadn't happened now either.
Yeah.
But boy, we get that wonderful, iconic line. And I think it's iconic, not just because we read it here in the book and it's a great line, but because that's one of those really well-written and well-delivered lines in the films. That's one that Gandalf really...
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't deliver it at this moment in the film, if I remember correctly. This is...
I think it comes at Moria in the movie,
doesn't it? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
And so that it does lose a little bit of its impact by moving it there, I think. But it was well said, and I think it's one of those lines that it's very hard to not hear Ian McKellen saying. All we have to decide is what to do.
You're absolutely right.
I had to try to read that with a different cadence.
So that I didn't
sound like I was trying to,
to sound like Ian McKellen.
Do a poor impression of Ian McKellen, because a poor impression is the only kind I can do.
He did a good job as Gandalf. Let's just put it out there. He did a fantastic job as Gandalf.
Absolutely. I may not be able to say that about everyone, but you can definitely say that about him.
Yeah. It really does lose something by moving it later in the story. When you see it here, right at the very beginning of Frodo's journey, you really see how Gandalf is giving him advice for his entire journey, isn't he?
Yeah, you're right.
He's giving him sort of a roadmap for how to behave going forward. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you. That's all any of us have to decide. It's still a cool moment when it comes up in the movie, like in Moria, like I think it is. But, But here you see how it is sort of the template for everything that's going to come. You can see this being a motivation that's going to drive Frodo forward.
Exactly. And it's one of the things that he takes into consideration, I think, when he makes the decision that he'll make at the end of the chapter.
Exactly. Yeah, that's absolutely right. He's got a lot more free will and agency in this version. Yeah.
And you know what? You mentioned free will and agency, and that brings up something that as many times as I've read this line, as many times as I've heard this line delivered in the films, I don't know that I'd ever really seen this in the light of fate versus free will, but that's exactly what we've got here. Gandalf says that is not for them to decide.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Well, that's fate. Fate is the thing that isn't for us to decide. It's not in our control.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing that is happening to us that we find ourselves in. That part's the fate.
Mm-hmm.
And yet simultaneously we have free will to do with what we have been given.
Mm-hmm.
So what is for us to decide? We have these two categories, what isn't for us to decide and what is for us to decide.
Mm-hmm.
And here we see them paired perfectly.
Yeah.
They're not exclusive of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not so much about the difference. I mean, there is a difference, but it's really about
how they work together.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is just, it's, we're going to see a lot of fate and free will, of course. And that's one of the big ongoing themes. But I think this here is a good place, that points that out. So
yeah, definitely.
I also wanted to touch on one other thing, the cover all the lands in a second darkness. I wanted to explore that a little bit because that phrase also appears spoken by Elrond in Of the Rings of Power in the Third Age. It says, "Nonetheless, I forebode that the one will yet be found, and then war will arise again. And in that war, this age will be ended. Indeed, in a second darkness it will end, unless some strange chance deliver us that my eyes cannot see.
Very
Great
good.
quote. Now, this was in response, Elrond saying this, to Curanir's, which is Saruman's statement, claiming that the one had been lost forever, having rolled into the sea. After Elrond says this, Gandalf reminds him brilliantly that many are the strange chances of the world, and help oft shall come from the hands of the weak when the wise falter. Just love that.
Gandalf's kind of reminding Elrond that, hey,
Yeah.
catastrophes are a thing.
Yeah,
You
they
never
are
know.
a thing, and
Yeah.
we never know. You never, ever know. And certainly it's not a surprise when it's those small hands, the hands of the weak, that end up doing the job when the wise can't figure it out. But interestingly, though, this same line, that was the one that came to my mind, was that one, because we'd just read of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, a year and a half ago.
Right. Feels like yesterday.
I know, feels like the day before, yeah. But Sam also used this same phrase. This was near Mount Doom. This was the last gasp. He began to wonder if a second darkness had begun and no day would ever reappear.
Wow, good catch.
Yeah, so I looked into that. I was like, okay, this is interesting. What's the significance of this second darkness? Well, going back to Tolkien's early draft of this chapter, at the time it was titled Ancient History, Tolkien did not include this line. But interestingly, his earliest drafts of the Rings of Power, those drafts were written in 1948. So it may be that the phrase that he gave Elrond in Of the Rings of Power might have been the inspiration for Gandalf's use of it here, not the other way around.
Oh, wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't guarantee that, of course, but
Right.
it certainly seems to be the case given the timing and the fact that the phrase Second Darkness was not in the original draft of this chapter.
Yeah, it could be something that as he was working on these things concurrently, he added that, or he wrote the Otrapada with that in it, and then he said, that's a cool phrase. I'm going to put that here and link it back. Yeah. Well, and what's interesting to me about this is, and I'm actually going to insert a question from listener Jeff L here, our good friend Jeff L.
From Tor, from Tor.com.
From Tor.com, yep. And he and I were talking recently, and he asked the question, what is a second darkness? Or really more specifically, what was the first darkness?
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Was it is it a literal thing? Is it a literal darkness that's being threatened here? In which case the first darkness was maybe a literal darkness before the sun and the moon, and maybe Sauron is going to do that again? Or is it really more of a spiritual or a metaphysical darkness? And I personally, and I think Jeff was going this way too, I personally am going to assume that it's not literal. I don't think that Sauron could literally bring down the sun, even though he manages to block it out in a localized area later on. I realize that.
Heavy clouds.
Yeah, exactly. Even with the ring, I can't imagine he could do much more than that. Maybe a bigger area, but that's it. So I definitely lean towards it being like a metaphorical or spiritual darkness.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But that does kind of beg the question of what was the first?
Even before we go to that, the first thing I thought of when you mentioned that was, I can't remember her name. Who was the Maya that carries the sun?
Arian,
thank you. I could not remember. Remember that Melkor couldn't even take her down. He couldn't even
that's
get
true.
near her.
Right,
and
and
if Melkor couldn't do it, I don't think Sauron
couldn't do it. Yeah,
No.
that's absolutely true. We know that Morgoth tried to take her down and couldn't. Yeah. So I don't know if we're looking at times of darkness that maybe some are a little bit literal and also spiritual. The first thing that I thought of was like the time of darkness before the kindling of the stars and the awakening of the elves. This is going back to like first 1 or 2 chapters of the Silmarillion, and there were no lights in the sky. It was a time of literal darkness, I guess you could say.
Sure.
But it was also a time of spiritual darkness because Morgoth was running rampant over Middle Earth. The Valar were just chilling in Valinor. They weren't doing anything to stop him.
They were Netflix and chilling. Just hanging out, man.
Maybe some of them were.
Oh, Tulkas.
Tulkas and Nessa. But Yavanna actually asked the other Valar about the elves. She said, "Shall they walk in darkness while we have light?"
I love that.
So that was that was the first thing I thought of. Is like, is Sauron really is he trying to do that again? Is he trying to do the thing where Morgoth basically was kind of running the entire show?
Yeah, I'd lean more towards like maybe Second Age. When the Númenóreans had left, Sauron was rising in power. That's when he built Barad-dûr. He first fortified Mordor. He'd already given the 9 rings to the men who had become the ring wraiths. Tolkien even describes the early centuries of the Second Age in the Akallabeth as the dark years of men.
Yeah.
And he says that the men that sat under the shadow were now grown weak and fearful. So I think we're talking about that. And
I think that probably is the one. Yeah. I thought of that one a little bit later on. Yeah.
Well, and even the text here says something right before the passage we read. Gandalf says to Frodo, well, I can't tell you the whole story because the beginnings lie back in the black years. And that's that same period of time, the dark years of men. That's
when Sauron was kind of doing his thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Unchecked by Numenor, unchecked by anybody. So I think that's what we're talking about here. That's the first darkness when Sauron was really the effective lord of any area that he wanted to be.
Yeah.
Until Numenor came and challenged him and eventually, captured him. Those are air quotes.
Okay, right, exactly. He allowed himself to be captured.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that really is the answer. That makes a lot of sense because it is Sauron really just wanting to take men out of the equation, take elves out of the equation, and that's basically what he was dealing with at the beginning of the Second Age. The Numenorians were gone. Yeah. And he kind of had the run of the place.
Yeah. I mean, there were still plenty of men around, but they were men who were easily weak. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They would succumb to his to either his threats and violence, or they were willing. They were evil men to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I agree. So there you go. There's your second darkness.
There's your second darkness right there. Okay, so next up, and we're not going to read the next paragraph, but we learn a little bit about the history of the 3 and the 7 and the 9. Again, I wish we could read it. I wish we could read every single word of this entire book, but we can't.
Right.
So we won't. But we do learn that the 3 were hidden. They were never touched or sullied by Sauron, and that's important.
Right. That is very important to understanding their power here, and we will talk about that a lot more. Yeah.
Yes, it is very important. And then we learn about the 7. We learn that 3 were recovered by Sauron, including, as we know, Thror's ring, which Appendix A tells us, according to the dwarves, was the first of the 7 that was forged. And again, this is interesting. According to them, it was given to the then king of Khazad-dûm, which is Durin III, by the elven smiths themselves and not by Sauron.
That is very interesting. Yeah.
We don't know that for sure. It's just according to the dwarves, right? I mean, there's a lot of things. It's another one of those. It is said that.
It is said, and you could certainly understand why somebody would want that to be the official story, even if it wasn't true. But
I wasn't deceived by Sauron. No, I told that guy to go away.
Right.
No.
But I mean, that's the only version we're given. So I think we can probably
so.
think it's probably accurate.
And it makes sense. Yeah. 4 consumed by dragons, by the way, is the other.
That's right.
Relation to the other 4 of the 7. So 3 are in Sauron's hands. 4 are just gone.
4 consumed by dragons.
And then, of course, the 3 and the elves were never touched. And then we get to the 9.
The 9. Oh, man.
Ooh.
I mean, this is men all over, isn't it? Proud and great and easily ensnared. I mean, that's...
You can hear Galadriel or Kate Blanchett right
so
there.
Easily seduced by its power.
Ensnared. I think didn't she use the word ensnared at some point?
Did she? I thought she said seduced. I don't know why.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I have to fact check that.
We will. Have
before we say anything definitive and find ourselves wrong again.
Which is likely to happen anyway.
Yeah, I know.
Probably said neither one.
It's one or the other.
They were tickled by them. Totally opposite of ensnared or seduced.
Oh, that's too funny. I was so easily tickled by rings.
See, I like to think of the exact opposite of things. It's just funnier that way.
That's wise. So, and this is where Gandalf explains how that they became ring wraiths. They became shadows under his great shadow.
Yeah. And interesting that they were proud and great before he gave them the rings.
Oh, sure.
And that's what made them fall under the dominion so quickly.
Oh, absolutely.
Going back to what he said before about, what you do when you get these. But oh my.
Yeah.
And even he's not sure that they're even doing anything. He said, it's been a long time since they've been around, but who knows? They too may walk again.
They could be coming again. Yeah.
I know I've been telling you some pretty scary things. I've been telling you about the land of Mordor. I've been telling you about the Dark Tower. I've been telling you about this Dark Lord. But we're not even going to talk about this in the Morning of the Shire. This is really bad.
Because this is really terrifying. These guys are much more terrifying than anything else I've mentioned to you.
Yeah. Wow. That's
poor Frodo.
He's just sitting there shivering in a puddle of his own urine.
Yeah. He's not leaving the house ever again.
It's like completely ruined for life. Oh, man.
Because the world is just too horrible and treacherous a place. Yeah.
Seriously, everywhere he goes now, there's doom and death and destruction everywhere. Oh, and by the way, I have some with me in the form of this ring.
Right. So even if you don't leave your house, they're coming to you.
You're
probably
pretty much
someday.
hosed, dude. It's all over, man.
Yep.
Oh, goodness. All right.
Craziness.
Well, before you read, I just want to say up front that this was an opportunity for us to really talk at length about the ring wraiths, but this chapter is so thick and so full of things that we did not feel like we had time here. So I think what we're going to do is in one of the 2 or 3 episodes that we do on Three's Company, when we end up actually encountering the ring wraith on the road, that's probably when we'll do a really lengthy sidebar on the ring wraiths themselves. But in the meantime, Shaun, you have some actual word nerdery on ring wraiths. I want you to...
I do. Yeah, I've got some word nerdery, and this comes from my favorite, Ring of Words.
Ring of Words.
The
ring
editors
of words. The Ring of Words.
Yep. And you can fall into it, too.
Yes,
like
you
a Ring of
can.
Fire.
Yes, you can.
So wraith is a word of Scottish origin. It's defined in the Oxford English Dictionary as an apparition or specter of a dead person, a phantom or a ghost. It's also got a definition that is an immaterial or spectral appearance of a living being, frequently regarded as portending that person's death. But I think the first one really is what we're dealing with here.
The second one, though, made me think of who was the... Okay.
Gollum. You're thinking of Gollum.
Thank you. That's exactly who I was thinking of, and I could not remember his name.
From chapter 19 of the Silmarillion, the Beren and Luthien chapter?
Yep, Beren and Luthien, the beginning of that tale.
Yep. Yeah, so the word wraith first appeared in both of those meanings in a translation of Virgil's Aeneid by a Scottish poet named Gavin Douglas. Now, its history before that is unknown, but according to the editors of Ring of Words, it is conceivable that wraith might be descended from an unrecorded noun related to the verb writhe, the original meanings of which were to coil something or to envelop or swathe something. Now, writhe, they said, was at one time inflected the same way that ride is inflected. So there's a past tense rothe, and there's a past participle writhen. Which is, you remember this, don't you?
Yeah, from the Gondolin.
Yeah. Right. Tolkien used this to describe the fourth gate of Gondolin,
Iron.
The gate of Writhen Iron. Yeah. And then the Ring of Words editors also point out that it describes the hills behind Mindalluin, too.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
Yeah, I don't remember that one either, but it is in there, yeah. So going back to the text of Ring of Words here, they say, just as the verb ride, past tense rode, is related to the noun raid, which, by the way, was news to me. I didn't realize that raid is the Scots form of the word road.
Oh, that's fascinating.
That's really fascinating, yeah. So they say writhe could be related to wraith.
Oh, wow.
So, although it does have this meaning, this sort of meaning on the surface of some sort of undead creature, which is clearly what Tolkien's going for, it is very probable Tolkien was also thinking of this possible etymology relating to writhing or coiling or twisting or enveloping, which is also pretty ominous.
That certainly works. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. That's really cool. Thanks for bringing that in, man. Ring of Words is great, isn't it?
It's such a great book. Yeah.
What a wonderful resource that is.
It really is. It really is. I really can just get lost in it.
Yeah.
There's so much cool stuff in there.
That is. Well, even though I just had you read from Ring of Words, I also want you to read from the book.
Goodness.
You've got the next section.
All right. So it is now. The 9 he has gathered to himself. The 7 also, or else they are destroyed. The 3 are hidden still. But that no longer troubles him. He only needs the 1, for he made that ring himself. It is his, and he let a great part of his own former power pass into it, so that he could rule all the others. If he recovers it, then he will command them all again, wherever they be, even the 3, and all that has been wrought with them will be laid bare, and he will be stronger than ever. And this is the dreadful chance, Frodo. He believed that the 1 had perished, that the elves had destroyed it, as should have been done. But he knows now that it has not perished, that it has been found. So he is seeking it, and all his thought is bent on it. It is his great hope, and our great fear.
All he needs is this 1, and it's all over.
It's
This
all
one in your
over.
hands, Frodo. That one right there.
Even the 3 that he has
Yeah.
never touched will be under his power if he gets a
Yeah.
hold of this one.
And all that they've done
High
will
stakes.
be laid bare. Very high stakes. End of the world type stakes. Yeah.
Yep.
And again, there's that line that, I don't know, for some reason I always hear Ian McKellen that he's seeking it and all his thought is bent on it. I mean, that was a great moment too.
That was a great moment. I also tried not to read that like him by just trying to forget that he even said it.
I know. It's hard to do, isn't it?
It is.
I have a feeling we're going to do that a lot, I think, with his lines in this
I think so,
in this
yeah.
book. More than anybody else's, I think. Mostly because his lines, a lot of them were kept intact, even if they were moved around.
That is true. He did have, a lot of his dialogue was straight from the book.
Yeah. Interesting, this notion that Sauron let a great part of his own former power pass into it. We've talked about this before. One of the titles of the books in the history of Middle-earth, Morgoth's Ring, sort of makes that implication that for Morgoth, it was all of Arda was his ring, that he had put so much power of it into of his own into the planet itself. Sauron here, it's the ring.
Yep.
And that's really the weakness.
Yeah, exactly. That we will be talking about this a lot more in a couple of episodes because we've got some mailbag questions on this. But you're right. I mean, that is the weakness, and we saw what that did to Morgoth, putting so much of his strength into Arda itself, so that he reached the point where he could no longer change his raiment. He could no longer heal himself when he was wounded by Fingolfin and Thorondor. And that's where we see Sauron now. He is weak. He put so much of his power into the ring, and then that's all well and good if you can hold on to the ring, but then he lost it. And that's the only reason that Gandalf and Frodo are around to have this conversation.
That's a very good point. Yeah, you're right. And the fact that he had put so much power to the ring is why when it was lost at the end of the Second Age, Sauron took so long to recover, to gain power again, to be able to show up as the necromancer and then to go back to Dol Guldur and rebuild the Dark Tower.
Yeah. He was starting from nothing. He was starting from, not nothing, but he was starting from a very, very
minimal
tiny
power was left.
Tiny shred of his power that was left to him. Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is a Maya we're talking about. This is one of the offspring of Iluvatar's thought.
Yeah.
It's
the chief lieutenant of Melkor. I mean, this who if I'm trying to remember the actual line of what it was said, but that he differed only in that he served another.
He served another and not himself. He was only less evil in that for a long time he served another and not himself.
But he still followed Melkor down the same, ruinous path to the void.
Into the void, yeah.
I think is what it said. I'd have to look that up, but that was some beautiful language.
That's in Valaquenta, I believe.
Yep, at the end and of the enemies, yeah. Yeah. Man, good stuff. So, of course, Frodo's response is, wait a minute. There's all this that you're telling me, and he's got all this power, and then we had it, the good guys had it. Why didn't it get destroyed?
Right. I mean, if it should have happened, why didn't
it happen? So I'm going to go ahead and explain that, or I'll let Gandalf explain it. I'll read Gandalf's words, and we'll go from there. So first, of course, Gandalf tells him it was taken. The strength of the elves to resist him was greater long ago, and not all men were estranged from them. The men of Westernesse came to their aid. That is a chapter of ancient history which it might be good to recall. For there was sorrow then, too, and gathering dark, but great valor, and great deeds were not wholly vain. One day, perhaps, I will tell you all the tale, or you shall hear it told in full by one who knows it best. But for the moment, since most of all you need to know how this thing came to you, and that will be tale enough, this is all that I will say. It was Gil-galad, Elven King, and Elendil of Westernesse who overthrew Sauron, though they themselves perished in the deed. And Isildur, Elendil's son, cut the ring from Sauron's hand, and took it for his own. Then Sauron was vanquished, and his spirit fled, and was hidden for long years, until his shadow took shape again in Mirkwood.
There you go.
I mean, you'll be picking up exactly where I left off, but I think that's a good stopping point to kind of discuss a little bit, mostly because of that wonderful line about Gandalf saying that there was sorrow then too in gathering dark, but great valor and great deeds that were not wholly vain.
Yeah.
Man, that is so important. That's such a Beowulf moment, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, the Last Alliance really is one of those, backs against the wall, fighting.
The circle of light surrounded by the darkness, yeah.
Yeah. And it's an excellent, all we have to decide is what to do at the time that is given us.
Boy, that's exactly right,
moment,
isn't it?
You know, because they, Elendil and Gil-galad did live in a time of darkness and sorrow,
Yeah.
but they fought.
They did. That's right. They united, which is the only way they
Mhm.
could have been able to do what they did.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
My goodness.
And they
yeah.
died. Yes, they died.
They did.
But
They individually died. You're right.
but there was a victory for elves and men then when Isildur cut the
Boy.
ring.
What a almost Pyrrhic victory in so many
Mhm.
ways.
Yeah.
To lose the last, the last
Gil-galad,
Elven
especially
king.
the
Yeah.
last High King of the Noldor. I mean, this was the son of Fingon, right?
I believe so.
I get mixed up sometimes because it's because of the two
yeah,
different
because
versions.
because of the two different versions.
Because in one
you're right.
version he's
yeah,
he's
let's not
Orodreth's
go
son.
there. Gil-galad's parentage is a big
It's something that
inconsistency in
Christopher Tolkien had doubts about. After
Yes.
it's one thing in the Silmarillion, and then he had doubts about it later on. But in the Silmarillion, it is he is Fingon's son.
That's what I thought, right? What a moment that is. And then, of course, Isildur taking the ring for his own. Kind of wish he didn't do that.
Kind of wish he didn't. Yeah.
Kind of wish he didn't. But we'll talk more about them, talk more about him, I should say, in just a moment. In the meantime, Sauron, we just talked about this a moment ago, his spirit fled and hid. He didn't have any power. He
Right.
couldn't do anything.
Right.
The loss of the ring was that significant.
It was long years until his shadow took shape again in Mirkwood, and that's why it was so significant
Yeah.
when they dealt with him during the time of
Yes.
the Hobbit.
Yeah, when the White Council. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that really is enough to talk about there, and then we want to get right back into this passage, so I'm going to have you pick up from there.
Okay. But the ring was lost. It fell into the great river Anduin and vanished. For Isildur was marching north along the east banks of the river, and near the Gladden fields he was waylaid by the orcs of the mountains, and almost all his folk were slain. He leaped into the waters, but the ring slipped from his finger as he swam, and then the orcs saw him and killed him with arrows. Gandalf paused. And there, in the dark pools amid the Gladden fields, he said, the ring passed out of knowledge and legend, and even so much of its history is known now only to a few, and the council of the wise could discover no more.
Interesting, just some of the language choices that Peter Jackson chose. That phrase, the ring
gave
passed
that-
out of knowledge and legend, he
Yeah.
gave that just slightly twisted, slightly changed, I should say,
Galadriel.
to Galadriel
Yeah.
in the prologue.
Yep.
That it passed out of all knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and that history became legend, legend became myth. Yeah. I kudos. I mean, again, I think we talked about the that prologue being one of the changes that we actually liked because it made sense from a cinematic standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, this chapter would have been wonderful on its own if it had been full, but it also would have been
It
an hour
would
long.
have that is a place where the canons of narrative art between
Yes. The
book
canons
and
of
film
narrative
are-
art cannot be wholly different.
Exactly, they're just
Yes,
too
but
different from book
how
to film.
different can they be? Sorry, that's
The Tom Shippey voice.
my terrible Tom Shippey impression.
You could not have Gandalf just explaining all this stuff to Frodo in a movie
No.
for 45 minutes. It
No.
just wouldn't work.
No.
So I think they did a good job with that.
Yeah, I agree. And we get that story, and that's important. But you know what we don't get is the real version of the story, as I like to call it. And I'm going to go ahead, and before we have you carry on and finish the next paragraph, which I want you to do, I'm going to read some selections from The Disaster of the Gladden Fields in Unfinished Tales.
I love this bit.
I do too. And I think we covered some of this back in Of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, but it is worth talking about again.
Yep,
Because I think this really helps us to understand a little bit more about Isildur, and it helps us to really kind of put into context the actions of what happened there at the Gladden Fields.
Yeah.
But before I read, you caught something in a footnote that was absolutely well worth mentioning. Why don't you go ahead and take that?
Yeah, I did because, one thing, you might be thinking about is, well, if Isildur was killed by orcs, well, why didn't the orcs just take the ring?
Mhm.
And bring it back to Sauron or,
Right.
carry it back to Mordor and see what they could do with it. Or one of them take it and become the new Dark Lord. But interestingly, there is actually a footnote in this section that you're about to read from, The Disaster of the Gladden Fields and Unfinished Tales. Footnote number 20 to that actually talks about the fact that basically the orcs that attacked Isildur had no idea what was going on. They didn't even know about the battle. They didn't know who won. They didn't know who Isildur was. And so I just think this is fascinating because it kind of shows you how evil kind of shoots itself in the foot. Picking up sort of in the middle of the footnote, it says, "It is unlikely that any news of Sauron's fall had reached them," speaking of the orcs.
Right.
"For he had been straitly besieged in Mordor, and all his forces had been destroyed. If any few had escaped, they had fled far to the east with the ringwraiths. This small detachment of the north," speaking now of the orcs that attacked Isildur, "of no account was forgotten. Probably they thought that Sauron had been victorious, and the war-scarred army of Thranduil was retreating to hide in fastnesses of the forest. Thus they would be emboldened and eager to win their master's praise, though they had not been in the main battles. But it was not his praise they would have won, if any had lived long enough to see his revival. No tortures would have satisfied his anger with the bungling fools who had let slip the greatest prize in Middle-earth, even though they could know nothing of the One Ring, which, save to Sauron himself, was known only to the 9 ringwraiths, its slaves." So these
I'm going
orcs had
to
no
torture
idea.
you because you didn't get the thing that I never
didn't
told
get
you
the thing
about.
that I never told you existed and that I really needed to take
because
over
I'm
the world.
paranoid and didn't want anybody.
Right, exactly. These
That's
orcs,
brilliant.
they had no idea who
None.
Isildur was. That's the only reason that the ring was able to lie there on the riverbed, unlooked for so long. I mean, and if Sauron had not been so possessive and paranoid to keep his ring a secret from his forces, and maybe I'm being too harsh because they're orcs, they probably would take it from him. But I mean, if they just known about it, he might have actually been notified. If you see a guy wearing a glowing headband, wearing, I don't know, some jewelry,
and if he disappears, like
if he disappears
at really
suddenly,
odd times, like for no reason,
but you can still see something glowing.
All right.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
You are. Well, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. For those of you who never read this passage, and again, because it's in Unfinished Tales, many of you may not, I want to set the stage first by giving you a few of the names. We know, of course, who Isildur is. His sons are with him on this journey. Their names are Elendor, Cirion, and Aratan. And I mention that because all 3 of those names will be mentioned. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pick up. And these are scattered portions throughout the text, so I'm not going to read consecutively because I'd be reading for 4 or 5 pages. I don't want to repeat the entire tale. I just want to repeat the portions that I think are relevant to our conversation tonight. But so the attack had come. The orcs were getting closer and closer. There was a pause. And during that, as the orcs were closing in on them, Elendor went to his father, who was standing dark and alone as if lost in thought. "Atarinya," he said, "what of the power that would cow these foul creatures and command them to obey you? Is it then of no avail?" "Alas, it is not, Senya. I cannot use it. I dread the pain of touching it, and I have not yet found the strength to bend it to my will. It needs one greater than I now know myself to be. My pride has fallen. It should go to the keepers of the 3. I love that moment every time I read it because it really redeems Isildur in so many ways. But unfortunately, at that very moment, the orcs, attack again, and night had come, as the text says, and hope faded. And we get to a point where the battle is definitely not going well. And in fact, Elendor comes back to Isildur and says, "My king," said Elendor, "Cirion is dead, and Aratan is dying. Your last counselor must advise, nay, command you as you commanded Otar." Otar was his esquire who had told earlier to go. "Go, take your burden, and at all costs bring it to the keepers, even at the cost of abandoning your men and me." "King's son," said Isildur, "I knew that I must do so, but I feared the pain. Nor could I go without your leave. Forgive me, and my pride that has brought you to this doom." Elendor kissed him. Go now," he said. Isildur turned west, and drawing up the ring that hung in a wallet from a fine chain about his neck, he set it upon his finger with a cry of pain, and was never seen again by any eye upon Middle-earth. But the Elendilmere of the west could not be quenched, and suddenly it blazed forth red and wrathful as a burning star. Men and orcs gave way in fear, and Isildur, drawing a hood over his head, vanished into the night. Now, I'll take a break before I go to the next part just to mention that we had talked about the Elendil mirror. There was a question in Bartleman's bag about what is made invisible and what isn't, and how do they interact with, objects and things, like if you were holding a ball and then you dropped it. And, we talked about the Elendil mirror specifically because then he was able to put a hood over his head, and that vanished him into the night.
Covered it, yeah.
Because
exactly.
it covered the Elendil
light,
mirror.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So he'd gotten, long story short, he gets to the banks of the Anduin. He stood for a while alone and in despair. Then in haste he cast off all his armor and weapons, save a short sword at his belt, and plunged into the water. He was a man of strength and endurance that few even of the Dunedain of that age could equal, but he had little hope to gain the other shore. Before he had gone far, he was forced to turn almost north against the current, and strive as he might, he was ever swept down towards the tangles of the Gladden fields. They were nearer than he had thought, and even as he felt the stream slacken and had almost won across, he found himself struggling among great rushes and clinging weeds. There, suddenly, he knew that the ring had gone. By chance, or chance well used, it had left his hand and gone where he could never hope to find it again. At first, so overwhelming was his sense of loss that he struggled no more and would have sunk and drowned. But swift as it had come, the mood passed. The pain had left him. A great burden had been taken away. His feet found the riverbed, and heaving himself up out of the mud, he floundered through the reeds to a marshy islet close to the western shore. There he rose up out of the water, only a mortal man, a small creature lost and abandoned in the wilds of Middle-earth. To the night-eyed orcs that lurked there on the watch, he loomed up, a monstrous shadow of fear, with a piercing eye like a star. They loosed their poisoned arrows at it and fled. Needlessly, for Isildur, unarmed, was pierced through heart and throat, and without a cry, he fell back into the water. No trace of his body was ever found by elves or men.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a story.
It is. It is a beautiful, heartbreaking, poignant tale.
Mm-hmm.
And it just really brings Isildur into just a much fuller view. I think it really gives us a much more understanding.
Yes. He's definitely a much more sympathetic character in that full version in the Unfinished Tales.
Absolutely.
And, and you really see how, just as we were talking about with Bilbo earlier, that as soon as the ring is gone from him, he changes. He feels better. He starts to, his spirits are lifted.
Just like Bilbo, there's that moment of despair, that moment where he just would rather sink and drown, and then, wow, that's gone. Oh, right. I'm not in pain anymore. Beautiful.
It's amazing.
Beautiful moment.
It really is.
Yeah.
You know what else I love about that? It was towards the beginning of the passage that you read, the Elvish words for father and son.
Yes, I thought the same thing. Those were so neat.
Was it Elendil who called his father Atarinya?
Yeah, Atarinya.
And Isildur calls his son Senya.
Beautiful words.
It's beautiful. Just, hearing this tender moment between a father and son.
Knowing,
and the way that the use
coming.
of the Elvish, knowing what's coming, and the way the use of the Elvish terms of endearment really just drives that point home. It's beautiful.
Does. It really is. I love that. And then, of course, there's the moment about the poisoned arrows, and I just couldn't help but think, shoot that poison arrow through my heart. Shoot that poison arrow.
ABC. ABC, man.
So, had to
have that on vinyl somewhere.
On vinyl. Wow.
I do have that on vinyl somewhere.
The whole album or just the 45?
Whole album. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't sure. I had to ask. I had a few 45s where I just bought the single.
I did have a few. Yeah.
Remember when you could do that? You could go buy a 45 RPM single for, I think they were like $1, weren't they? Maybe $2?
Something like that. Yeah. and there was even another song on the other side.
Yeah. And it was always a song that was not a radio hit. That was kind of
right.
Ooh,
it was a B-side.
That's right.
Yep.
Man, we're showing our age.
Yes, we are.
But yeah.
That's why we have B-sides at the Prancing Pony podcast, too.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. Man, But that passage is tremendous, and I would really never pass up an opportunity to read it. It almost brings, I shouldn't say almost, it does bring tears to my eyes if I'm not reading it out loud on a podcast. And it almost did tonight. It was a real fight to get through that.
It's a powerful moment, and that's why things like the Unfinished Tales are so
have so much richness and
so
depth.
worth reading. Yeah,
I agree. Well, now that we've done that, and we'll fast forward to the next ring bearer. If you could take that next paragraph, that'd be great.
Okay. And Gandalf is continuing the story here from the point at which he says, which we did not read, "At last I can carry on the story."
Oh yes, that's true. Well, anyway, now we've read it.
Yeah. Long after, but still very long ago, there lived by the banks of the great river on the edge of Wilderland a clever-handed and quiet-footed little people. I guess they were of hobbit kind, akin to the fathers of the stores, for they loved the river and often swam in it, or made little boats of reeds. There was among them a family of high repute, for it was large and wealthier than most, and it was ruled by a grandmother of the folk, stern and wise in old lore, such as they had. The most inquisitive and curious-minded of that family was called Sméagol. He was interested in roots and beginnings. He dived into deep pools. He burrowed under trees and growing plants. He tunneled into green mounds, and he ceased to look up at the hilltops, or the leaves on trees, or the flowers opening in the air. His head and his eyes were downward.
Oh, man, that tells us a lot about him, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah.
Yeah. And it tells you why he struggled so much with one of those riddles, the daisy one. It took him, I remember the text that talked about it. It had been so long since he'd thought of those things.
Since he thought of those things above the ground, yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe tells us a little bit about why he went underground in the first place. He was always looking that way to begin with.
Well, we see that very specifically, very explicitly, saying that that's why he does. He looks at the mountains and thinks, well, there's some secrets under there. I'm going to go there.
Yep, absolutely.
But I'm getting ahead of ourselves.
We are.
I did find it was interesting, just to mention, I don't know if there's anything to it, but I thought it was interesting that the family was ruled by a grandmother, that it's matriarchal, which is something we don't really see in The Hobbit, do we? Or in the Shire.
That is interesting. That is interesting, because there are a couple of things here that are very similar to Bilbo, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming from a large family, Bilbo is certainly from a large family on the Took side.
Yep.
Wealthy family, that's Bilbo. But matriarchal is not so much. I mean,
right.
I guess his mother's a Took, but that's really, and his mother is a remarkable woman, but
one of the remarkable daughters of the old Took,
right? Exactly, but not a matriarchal society. So that is very interesting.
Yeah.
But I think even more interesting to me is just how much is similar to Bilbo here.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and it's clear that they are, relatives of the Hobbit. Like Gandalf says, akin to the fathers of the Stores. So, they're not
direct
closely
line
related anymore.
Of the Hobbits, like cousins, certainly.
Yeah,
distant cousins. Yeah,
absolutely.
And the Stores specifically, that's interesting.
Yes, isn't it? Well, and that's because of the water, I think.
The love for the river. Yeah,
because they're the only breed, so to speak, of hobbits that will even deal with the water. The Fallowhides and the Harfoots won't have anything to do with it. So,
no boats, thank you.
No boats for you. Sméagol, you have some word nerdery on Sméagol.
I do, because we get this about Sméagol. He's described as inquisitive and curious, interested in roots and beginnings, which I think is fascinating, and I may say something about in a little bit here. But first some word nerdery here. Sméagol and Deagol, and this is from Ring of Words, and I know we haven't talked about Deagol yet, but we're about to get to him. So
yes, we will.
Sméagol,
and then he'll be gone.
And then, it's really a walk-on roll.
It's a short visit. Yeah, it's a walk-on roll. Don't worry, you still get scale. You've got a line, so you get scale.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Sméagol is actually related to the word smile, that word for a hobbit hole that we've seen a few times. And
not smile like lips moving in an upward form. We're talking
smile,
like
S-M-I-A-L, Took of Great Smiles. Yeah,
that's right.
So, smile, meaning a hobbit hole, according to Ring of Words, is an invented modern English form of Sméagol's, a burrow, which is an Old English word that did not survive the Norman Conquest.
Boo! Norman Conquest again. Sorry, I had to do that.
You're still
still holding that grudge.
So mad about that Norman conquest.
Nearly 1,000 years later, and I'm still all mad about that.
Yep.
French.
So the root, right. So the root of these words is Germanic smugon, which means to creep or penetrate gradually. And you may remember that the name of the dragon Smaug was also derived from that word. Tolkien explains Smaug's name as meaning squeeze through a hole, a low philological jest.
That's right. That's right.
So the editors of Ring of Words explain, it seems that Tolkien especially liked this root.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. He's got
Smaug and Sméagol.
Yeah, and smile. They say from it comes also another Old English verb, smeagon, meaning to scrutinize or investigate. And from that, Tolkien created Gollum's true name, Sméagol, which has the shape of an Old English adjective ending in ol. Another example of an adjective formed in this way in Old English is Deagol, secret, which Tolkien borrowed for the name of Sméagol's best friend. It is highly appropriate, and I love this from Ring of Words, it says, it is highly appropriate that this unpleasant pair are named Inquisitive and Secretive.
Oh, my. That's good stuff.
Isn't that cool?
That really, really is. Oh, though calling Deagol Sméagol's best friend might be an overstatement.
Well,
no, I know.
I mean,
I know. They are friends, yeah.
They seem to have been friends.
Yeah, he had a friend called Deagol.
First victim just doesn't have the same ring to it.
He had a first victim called Deagol. Yeah, no, that doesn't work. You're right. So we're not going to read that next little bit, but that's where Deagol finds the ring at the bottom of the river. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick up here with the charming bits. So this is Gandalf telling the story.
Right.
Then up he came, spluttering, with weeds in his hair and a handful of mud, and he swam to the bank. And behold, when he washed the mud away, there in his hand lay a beautiful golden ring, and it shone and glittered in the sun, so that his heart was glad. But Sméagol had been watching him from behind a tree, and as Deagol gloated over the ring, Sméagol came softly up behind.
"Give us that, Deagol, my love,"
said Sméagol over his friend's shoulder.
"Why?"
said Deagol.
"Because it's my birthday, my love, and I wants it,"
said Sméagol.
"I don't care," said Deagol. "I've given you a present already, more than I could afford. I found this, and I'm going to keep it." "Oh, are you indeed, my love?"
said Sméagol, and he caught Deagol by the throat and strangled him, because the gold looked so bright and beautiful. Then he put the ring on his finger, because he should have put a ring on it. Sorry.
Boy, that's a defense to use in court.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm sorry, Your Honor, the gold looks so bright and beautiful.
I couldn't help it, Your Honor. That's
I
absolutely
couldn't
right.
help it. I
Mitigating
had to.
circumstances, the attractiveness of the metal.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, come on. By the way, I think I'm absolutely now a split personality. Not Sméagol Deagol, but Sméagol Gandalf Deagol Gandalf. That just was,
Yeah. That was well done. I know that wasn't
well, I
easy.
don't know.
but-
I don't know if it was well done, but it was done. Maybe it was well done like a steak, as in, I don't want that. I send it back.
Maybe it was well done and that it was tough and it leaves your mouth dry.
There you go. Absolutely. A little leathery. Yeah, absolutely. Interesting that the very first thing we see here is this desire to possess. You know,
Yes.
Immediately. It's so much the ring at work right away.
Immediately. Yeah.
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 Both of them.
and
I mean, Deagol is no better. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Both of them are, they don't hesitate. They immediately want to have this thing and are willing to fight over it.
Absolutely.
You know, Sméagol actually seeking to dominate his so-called friend here.
Yeah.
And take it from him.
To flat out kill him.
Mm-hmm.
So what does he do now that he has the ring? I'm going to have you take a little bit of that next bit.
Not nice things.
No,
Let's just put it that way.
No, not nice things.
And
he doesn't use
will,
it to like, go into people's houses and
he
like
doesn't.
cook.
He doesn't use it to throw his grandmother a surprise party for her birthday.
Right, or like go in and
Yeah.
cook dinners like randomly.
No.
So like you come
No.
home and there's a dinner set out for you. Yeah.
Nope. He was very pleased with his discovery, and he concealed it, and he used it to find out secrets, and he put his knowledge to crooked and malicious uses. He became sharp-eyed and keen-eared for all that was hurtful. The ring had given him power according to his stature. It is not to be wondered at that he became very unpopular, and was shunned when visible by all his relations. They kicked him, and he bit their feet. He took to thieving, and going about muttering to himself and gurgling in his throat. So they called him Gollum, and cursed him, and told him to go far away. And his grandmother, desiring peace, expelled him from the family, and turned him out of her hole.
I'm sure Gollum would tell us that that's what made that she was a terrible person for this, that he was the victim.
Oh, I'm certain. Yeah.
But I will say that if you're becoming unpopular, the thing to do is probably not muttering
Bite
to yourself,
feet.
gurgling in your throat, biting feet, and thieving. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Just,
I think it's fascinating how he immediately used the ring to do the worst things possible.
Absolutely.
Finding out secrets and then using those secrets to, probably blackmail people, probably steal things, just all kinds of hurtful things.
Just terrible.
Yeah. So what we're seeing here is that Sméagol, his ownership of the ring began with the exact opposite of what Bilbo's ownership of the ring began with.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, we saw, and we've discussed this before, how Bilbo started his ownership of the ring with an act of pity, not killing Gollum. And Gollum is the exact opposite. Not only an act of murder over Deagol, but also all this horrible stuff.
Oh, I know.
And I probably would also say that, Bilbo kind of tells minor lies to his friends about where the ring came from. Well, he doesn't even tell them about the ring at first.
No.
He just kind of lies about his stealth at first.
I just sneaked right past him. That was brave.
Right. So Bilbo kind of tells these sort of innocuous lies at first, but again, Sméagol uses the ring to get all this really, really just
crooked and malicious uses. Using
hurtful again to hurt people, and we can just imagine the horrible things he's doing with it. It's interesting that
it is
the vast difference between those two.
Yeah, and it really does speak to the difference between the two characters in the first place, but it also speaks to the ring at work, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the ring had been, sort of in stasis, if you will, for over a couple thousand years at this point. And so, naturally it wanted to get back to doing evil, and Sméagol helped to do that.
Got some evil stuff to do. I need somebody to help. Yeah,
that's right. Got work to do, man. Let's get to work.
Absolutely right.
Interestingly, we get these, we're not going to read it again because we can't read everything, this wonderful description of kind of his thought process and why he ended up under the mountains. And it all had to do with, the cool and the shade. He wanted to get out from under the sun. He shook his fist at the sun. I mean, he hates the sun. He hates the light. And what have we learned about evil in Lord of the Rings? The
always
darkness,
hates the sunlight.
Hates the light.
Yeah.
Always hates the light. So, and of course, because he's into roots and beginnings, it's a great place for him to go. The roots of these mountains must be roots indeed, he says. And then he ends up, winding his way. Wormed his way like a maggot. I love that.
Yeah, I know.
He didn't just find his way to the heart of the hills. No, he wormed his way like a maggot.
Such a way with words.
Indeed.
I have to say, his looking for great secrets, I have to say it reminds me of Fëanor.
Oh, yes.
Remember Fëanor? This is back, chapter 5 or 6?
Yeah, one of those.
Of the Silmarillion.
Where he was going all the way out to the borders.
Going to the borders of the dark and the cold shores of the outer sea.
Seeking the unknown. Yeah.
This strikes me as very Fëanorian.
You're right. It sure does.
And just the way that Sméagol seems to, he's only interested in sort of the material world. He's only interested in kind of like getting to the secrets of things below him. I don't know. It just strikes me as very Fëanorian.
That is interesting.
It's materialistic to a really extreme degree. And I think that's fascinating. But I will say there's one thing here in this section that we didn't read that really makes me feel sorry, really breaks my heart, actually.
Yeah.
Is the first sentence after what I read, where Gandalf says he wandered in loneliness, weeping a little for the hardness of the world. I'll point out that, he brought a lot of that on himself.
Well, yeah, the world is hard to people who kill people and bite feet and thieve and blackmail and
Absolutely. But
you're right. There is still a sorrow and an empathy for him. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, there's probably, I don't know, maybe I'm bringing too much to it, but I almost get the idea that Sméagol doesn't really understand why what he's doing is wrong. And maybe I am bringing too much to that, but I don't know. I think Tolkien wants us to feel that pity for him.
Oh, I think he does.
Just as we always have, going back to chapter 5 of The Hobbit. And,
absolutely.
And that's such a powerful sentence to come in the middle of, this litany of horrible things he's done, that we get this one little
Beginning with
sentence
murder.
of that we get this one little sentence of him weeping. Yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
it's
I
really,
think you're
it's
right.
really intense to me.
I think it is something that we're supposed to feel, some empathy, and some sorrow. I guess sympathy would be a better word than empathy. I
Sympathy.
shouldn't quite be able to place myself in his shoes.
No, you don't want to identify with him too much.
No, you don't. But you're right. That's a very good point. You actually get the next passage too. I want to have you read this. Frodo's essential reaction to finding out who this is.
He's not happy about what he's hearing.
No, he's not, is he? I think abominable is the word he uses, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. Okay. Gollum, cried Frodo. Gollum? Do you mean that this is the very Gollum creature that Bilbo met? How loathsome! I think it is a sad story, said the wizard. And it might have happened to others, even to some hobbits that I've known. I can't believe that Gollum was connected with hobbits, however distantly, said Frodo with some heat. What an abominable notion. It is true all the same, replied Gandalf. About their origins, at any rate, I know more than hobbits do themselves. And even Bilbo's story suggests the kinship. There was a great deal in the background of their minds and memories that was very similar. They understood one another remarkably well, very much better than a hobbit would understand, say, a dwarf, or an orc, or even an elf. Think of the riddles they both knew, for one thing. Yes, said Frodo, though other folks besides hobbits ask riddles, and of much the same sort. And hobbits don't cheat. Gollum meant to cheat all the time. He was just trying to put poor Bilbo off his guard, and I dare say it amused his wickedness to start a game which might end in providing him with an easy victim, but if he lost would not hurt him. Only too true, I fear, said Gandalf. But there was something else in it, I think, which you don't see yet. Even Gollum was not wholly ruined. He had proved tougher than even one of the wise would have guessed, as a hobbit might.
Indeed.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Built Stewart tough. That's all I can think of.
Built Stewart tough. You can kind of hear the,
yeah, the ring smashing into the side of the
exactly,
Built
like a toolbox
Stewart
or
tough.
something. Yep. the bed of a pickup truck.
Exactly.
Oh, goodness. So not fully ruined, not completely fallen. We've talked about that before, huh?
We have.
I think we were asked about when did Gollum fall? And you made the very good point that he didn't completely fall until he fell into the lava, really.
Yeah.
That only then was he completely gone. That up until then there was always that chance.
Yep.
And Gandalf always has hope.
Yeah. Gandalf does always have hope because that's who he is. That's Gandalf.
That's exactly who he is.
And that's kind of what drives him. Yeah, I mean, Frodo's reaction here is exactly the reaction any of us would have if we're told that, this
not related
horrible
to me.
Little creature Gollum is actually one of you.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? No, absolutely not.
Can't possibly be one of us.
And you see his revulsion to this idea, this denial of the idea. Gandalf is all about pity and sympathy here. I love it.
Well, remember who he studied under in Valinor,
Nienna, yeah.
Yeah, that time with Nienna certainly gave him an insight on pity that, proved absolutely essential to the salvation of Middle-earth, really.
Absolutely,
So.
yeah. Gandalf kind of reminds Frodo that he's the person who studied Hobbit origins, not Frodo.
Yeah,
so believe me,
right.
I know what
I'm
I'm
the
talking
expert
about
here.
a little bit more than you
may
do.
be a Hobbit, but I know more about Hobbits.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
That's a good point. Well, we also get a couple of other things in the passage that we're not going to read there. We get this hate-filled life, that he hates the dark, he hates the light, he hates everything, and he hates the ring most of all. And Frodo doesn't get that, and Gandalf explains, and that's where I'm going to pick up. He says, "You ought to begin to understand, Frodo, after all you have heard," said Gandalf. "He hated it and loved it, as he hated and loved himself. He could not get rid of it. He had no will left in the matter. A ring of power looks after itself, Frodo. It may slip off treacherously, but its keeper never abandons it. At most, he plays with the idea of handing it on to someone else's care, and that only at an early stage, when it first begins to grip."
but as far as I know, Bilbo alone in history has ever gone beyond playing and really done it. He needed all my help, too. And even so, he would never have just forsaken it or cast it aside. It was not Gollum, Frodo, but the ring itself that decided things. The ring left him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and skip a little bit because as much as I like to read everything, we're going to read to the next part here that makes our point for us in terms of the ring and fate. And here we go.
So I'll point out kind of where you're going with this, because I know where you're going with this. This first passage you've just read talks about the ring.
Yes.
And what the ring
The
is
will of
doing
the ring.
under its own agency. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we're going to get the other will.
Mm-hmm.
There was more than one power at work, Frodo. The ring was trying to get back to its master. It had slipped from Isildur's hand and betrayed him. Then, when a chance came, it caught poor Deagol, and he was murdered. And after that, Gollum, and it had devoured him. It could make no further use of him. He was too small and mean, and as long as it stayed with him, he would never leave his deep pool again. So now, when its master was awake once more and sending out his dark thought from Mirkwood, it abandoned Gollum, only to be picked up by the most unlikely person imaginable, Bilbo from the Shire. Behind that, there was something else at work, beyond any design of the ringmaker. I can put it no plainer than by saying that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, and not by its maker. In which case, you also were meant to have it. And that may be an encouraging thought.
Or it may be a terrifying thought, one or the other. Maybe a little bit of both.
Probably a little bit of both.
But this is really a central passage, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
These two countering forces, the sentient agency, maybe not sentient agency, but the independent agency of the ring as empowered by Sauron. And we'll talk more about the sentience of the ring or the apparent sentience of the ring as we move forward. But the power of that agency and the superior power of Iluvatar. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Let's be real clear.
Yeah,
I can put it no plainer than by saying that Bilbo is meant to find the ring by Iluvatar. Because that's the only power that is relevant here that could have had anything to do with this. And it's pure eucatastrophe. Absolutely.
Yeah. It is completely eucatastrophe. And we even saw in chapter 5, when chapter 5 of The Hobbit.
Of The Hobbit, right. I knew what you meant, yeah.
When we read that and we talked about how Bilbo just blindly found the ring. I mean, his hand just
what are the odds
of
that?
Basically. Yeah.
In the middle of a cave, and come on, it's this big, No.
Right. And so what we see is basically the ring gets away from Gollum, but then Iluvatar makes sure that Bilbo finds it.
That's right. That's absolutely right. The ring did abandon Gollum. And how perfect is that? Because if the ring hadn't done its job of leaving Gollum, it wouldn't have been in a position for Bilbo
to find it. Yeah, that's a very good point.
And that's once again Spibimi at work, isn't it?
Absolutely.
This is an evil thing.
Doing something evil neutral. For evil reasons.
Right. Well, I mean, in this case, it's a neutral act of leaving Gollum.
Sure, yeah. But for evil purposes.
Right,
because
exactly.
It wants
to get back to its master.
Let's do some
evil. So here's this thing. Yeah, that's right. Let's get to work. And Iluvatar turns it into this eucatastrophe.
I'm going to make sure that this person happens by it just at this time.
This one person who is the only one, because then he's going to give it to this other one who's the only one who can do this job. I mean,
and by the way, this one who finds it, Bilbo, is going to be the only person who's strong enough to actually give it up of his own volition.
That's absolutely right. Man. See, and that's the thing. This is such an amazing connection and the realization of eucatastrophe, of Spibimi, of all of these concepts that we've been talking about, even fate and free will. I mean, Bilbo's maybe fated to find that, but he still chose to pick it up and put it in his pocket.
Yeah.
And he chose to give it to Frodo here at the end, I mean, he didn't have to. And Gandalf even says, I couldn't have made him do it, but he did it of his own free will.
Right.
So we have all of those themes, fate and free will, eucatastrophe, Spibimi, all at work here. And it is just spectacular. Really is.
And then this is what, spoilers, folks, this is what is going to, to save Middle-earth eventually.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's awesome stuff. It is, it's a huge catastrophe moment.
It is. Well, folks, that wraps it up for the second part of The Shadow of the Past, but be sure to come back next week when Frodo has to make the hardest decision of his life.
At least so far.
Well,
But before we get to that, we want to take a minute to remind you about the Fellowship of the Podcast. That's our family of supporters over at Patreon. We're getting closer to our next goal of setting up a Discord server, which is going to give our patrons a chance to listen in live during one of these recordings.
Oh, man.
And laugh and cry.
Do I now think this was a bad idea? Yes, I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, with good reason. But also, in addition to just kind of seeing how the sausage is made, or hearing how the sausage is made,
well, right.
We'll get a sneak peek at an upcoming episode through that process.
Right, absolutely. And that will be a special treat for you. So be sure to visit patreon.com/prancingponypod. When you do join the Fellowship of the Podcast at the Gift of Gondor tier or above, you'll also get access to exclusive content like our full-length bonus episodes each quarter. We just released a very powerful one on race a couple of weeks ago that was really fun to put together. Well, fun might be the wrong word, but it was a really good episode. It was a
really good episode, something we're proud of. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, not only do you get those each quarter, you get short postscripts to each of our chapters. So those are good things to get.
That's right. But there's another way you can help us too. You can check out the official library pages at our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. There we've put together a set of links for our listeners to all the Tolkien books we've ever mentioned on the show. You can also give us a hand by posting a review on iTunes. That increases our visibility. That means more new listeners, more good questions for Barliman, more discussion on social media, and just a more vibrant Tolkien community, which is kind of what we're all about.
That really is. And folks, we'd really appreciate you sharing us on social media. So things like Twitter and Facebook and Reddit and wherever you hang out. As long as you can find Tolkien fans, tell them about our show. Now, before we move on to Barliman's Bag, we want to let you know, we talked about this last week, but we want to remind you that pretty soon, as far as podcast time is concerned, we'll be coming up on our 11st episode. And we are planning on celebrating with an episode of special magnificence.
And while we would love to invite every single one of you and give presents to all and sundry, unfortunately, I don't think our order for crackers from Dale will be here in time. So
no.
Instead of that, we've come up with a different way for you to participate in this little celebration.
Yeah, we should have done Dale Prime, and I completely forgot about that.
Well, you don't think you're going to use it, so why pay for the subscription? And then it's always when, last minute, you suddenly realize, I should have done it.
Should have done it. Well, in fact, like Shaun said about participating in our little celebration, we literally won't be able to do our celebration without your participation. What we want is to replay our top moments from our first 100 or so episodes, along with a little director's commentary, if you will. But please, you'll have to forgive us for not knowing exactly what those top moments are, and that's why we're coming to you.
We want you to recall your favorite PPP moments, and then send us an email that includes some information about it. Tell us the episode number, the start and end time of the segment that you'd like us to play, and just tell us what you really enjoyed about it. Whether it's a serious moment of discussion, a chat with a guest, or just one of our horrible, horrible jokes. It's all fair play for our 11st episode.
Yes, it is. So if you wanted the first time we explained Spibimi and still couldn't pronounce our own acronym, you'd tell us, I want to listen to episode 5 from 85 minutes to 88 minutes or something like that. And of course, with somewhere around 180 hours of content, we just can't make those selections ourselves. We don't have the time to listen to every one of our episodes in order to find them. But we know that between all 5,000 of you, there's time. And you already know which moments are your favorites, and you're going to be able to look them up and get that information to us.
That's right. So help us with the selections, and you'll get a shout out if your segment is selected. So get listening and start sending those timestamps. You got 6 weeks now until December 9th to get your selections in. That'll give Alan and me time to go through those and curate the selections and prepare our commentary and fit the content into an episode-length recording before it airs early in 2019.
That's right. Now, please don't delay, folks. This party of special magnificence will only work with your help. Otherwise, it's going to snow food and rain drink. Now, before we get to even bigger news, there's a teaser for you. It's time to see what old Barliman has in the mailbag for us. Shaun?
All right. Well, to cap off a delightful pre-Halloween edition of the Prancing Pony podcast, in which we've talked about wraiths and cold-blooded murder and the end of the world, we've got a wonderful question about Middle-earth's Walking Dead. I mean the dead men of Dunharrow, of course.
Oh, okay.
Now, we're not going to get to them in the story for a few years, I'm afraid, but Adam B. sent us a very fun question about them that I just couldn't resist placing in this episode this week. but I've asked Alan to read it because I've got so many things to say about it that I'm going to need to catch my breath.
Well, while you're taking a rest, here's Adam's question. He asks how the Oathbreakers became transformed from originally mortal men cursed by Isildur to undead specters or ghosts. He points out that Legolas described them as much being ghostly in aspect, with their horses and banners following them. Certainly, he says, they're not necessarily animated bodies, but more likely spirits. So when the Oathbreakers died, did they become ghosts? Or were they something else? Did they become a zombie army? Brains. How do we actually think that they transformed from mortal men who lingered on from Isildur's time until when Aragorn found them on the paths of the dead?
That's a very, very fun question, Adam. And I'd like to add that last year, Matt R. in London asked a similar question about why Isildur's curse on the Oathbreakers seems to work and to doom them to this undead status. So I'll just pop that in here and say that the two sub-questions to address here are, what kind of undead are they, and how is it possible that they're undead in the first place?
Interesting. Well, Shaun, you are the horror movie fan of the group and therefore the expert on undead, so I'm going to let you take the lead on this one.
All right, well, I wouldn't dare say undead. I've probably got some friends who could talk circles around me here, but here's what I'll start with. I'll start with the question of what kind of undead they are, with one big caveat. Of course, Tolkien doesn't give us any kind of undead taxonomy to work with. I mean, there's no monster manual of Middle-earth.
But, I'll write one.
That would be fun, actually.
That would be. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. But working strictly from, sort of our popular ideas of different kinds of undead creatures and my own ancient history with role-playing games.
Yeah, I guess it is that now, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think we can infer some things from the description we're given. First of all, they're not a zombie army, and I think Adam was joking about that. What we call zombies are usually reanimated corpses with little to no will or sentience. Whereas the dead men whom Aragorn summons in the Paths of the Dead, well, they clearly have some free will because they choose to follow him. And they clearly have sentience because they do speak. But more importantly than all that, and Adam kind of hinted at this, they don't seem to have physical bodies at all. The description of them throughout the chapter is more consistent with a ghost or some kind of incorporeal spirit. As Adam points out, Legolas says, I see shapes of men and of horses, and pale banners like shreds of cloud, and spears like winter thickets on a misty night.
I see shapes of men and of horses too, and pale
and I think
banners
to myself,
like shreds of cloud.
Oh man, that's
and
beautiful.
Spears like winter thickets on a misty night. Sorry.
And I think to myself, what a wonderful dead.
Oh man, bad stuff.
Terrible.
I'm so sorry.
That is terrible.
That's awful. We're going to get letters on that one, man.
We probably will, and well deserved. But the use of cloud and mist imagery there, that clearly suggests that they're not physical bodies. They're something wispy and ghostly, I think.
Right, yeah.
Add to that the fact that the sound of their feet is described as a shadow sound. Aragorn asks this question, Oathbreakers, why have ye come? And he's answered by a disembodied voice. And the narration tells us that it answered as if from far away. That sounds more...
Sorry.
Indeed.
It is late and I am goofy when it's late.
It is. It's great. I love it.
Oh, man.
Legolas calls them shadows. He says he says, I feared not the shadows of men. And he thinks to himself that even the shades of men are obedient to Aragorn's will. So clearly, I think they're ghosts. They're not zombies. They're not rotting corpses walking around.
No, definitely ghosts. I mean, they certainly weren't an army of, let's say, bright green ghosts that take down Oliphants like swarming ants. I mean, I'm pretty sure of that.
No, that is quite true.
Grinning ghosts come out to socialize.
Oh wow, I'm gonna have to make sure my son hears this. That's one of his favorite songs, especially
from Haunted Mansion. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, from Haunted Mansion at Disneyland and Disney World. But anyhow, so yes, more like ghosts than zombies. As for the other question of how they ended up that way, that is how Isildur's curse to rest never until your oath is fulfilled, how that had any power over them in the first place. Well, that's a place where I think we have to speculate. We know that, of course, that men's Fëanor, or spirits, go beyond the circles of the world after they die. I mean, that's Ilúvatar's design.
Yeah, that's the gift of men.
And we know that no power in Arda, not Sauron, not Mandos, and certainly not another man like Isildur, could change that. if Iluvatar willed it.
Right. I mean, Iluvatar is the boss. So,
Yep.
we should point out, though, at this point, the Ringwraiths aren't actually dead yet. They're just really, really, really stretched. I mean, a lot more
Right.
stretched than Bilbo or even Gollum ever were.
They're just mostly dead.
Now it's your turn. Good. Well played, sir. Well played.
Thank you. No, seriously, that's true. The Ringwraiths are not dead, and not even Sauron or a ring could keep their spirits in Middle-earth if they were dead.
No.
But
no,
the dead men of Dunharrow clearly are dead, and we know they're men.
Yeah.
So we don't even have the out of saying they might be elves who refused the summons to Mandos. Remember, we had a question about the dead marshes.
Yeah. That was a fun one.
Yeah, it was. I think this time last year.
It was a Halloween question. Yeah.
Yeah. We said they're probably elves. We don't even have that option here. These are clearly men.
These are men. You're right.
So it must mean that Isildur's curse has some kind of supernatural force, but obviously it can't be his own doing. It
No,
has
he
to be
wouldn't
that
have
his
that
curse
natively.
is...
No, he couldn't
No,
have that
not at
power
all.
on his own.
No, his curse has to be granted force by some divine power. And I think knowing that even the Valar can't change what happens to men after they die, they can't take away the gift to men, I'm left concluding that Iluvatar himself must be the one to have heard Isildur's curse and granted it. That seems shocking. I know that seems like a very strange thing for Iluvatar to do, allow something like this to happen to his children, but I don't know. Maybe he does it because he knows they are going to be needed someday.
True.
True. Iluvatar plays the long game. When you're an eternal being, you can do that.
Well, yeah.
It could be that he's allowing Isildur to have his curse, knowing that these dead men are going to be instruments in a catastrophic moment for Aragorn, thousands of years later.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my take on it. Alan, you might totally disagree, and I kind of hope you do, but what do you think?
Well, what'd you have to go and come up with a brilliant answer for? That makes it really hard.
Well, thank you.
I can't really disagree, but I do want to add something. I want to talk about another reason why Iluvatar would give effect to this curse that Isildur placed on the men of Dunharrow. It comes from the verse that's attributed to Malbeth the seer in the days of Arvedui, last king at Fornost, as Aragorn explains. I'm going to read a few lines from that prophecy. The dead awaken, for the hour is come for the oath breakers. At the stone of Erech they shall stand again, and hear there a horn in the hills ringing. Whose shall the horn be? Who shall call them from the grey twilight, the forgotten people? The heir of him to whom the oath they swore. And I didn't pick that just because it's a alliterative verse. I mean, I could. It's that good, but I didn't.
Yeah, it is really good.
We've talked before back in season 1 about the nature and power of oaths in Middle-earth.
We have.
They are quite real. They are very, very real, and their power really does bind the one who swears an oath. All it takes to confirm that is a look at Feanor and his sons. So, we have this oath given to Isildur, and no, we're not given the actual details of that oath, the wording of that oath, but it does seem that all oaths eventually call on Iluvatar for enforcement. They, by their very nature, would call on some power beyond in order to enforce that oath. So it's either explicitly or implicitly, and in this case it appears to be implicit. So these people broke their oath, which calls Iluvatar's punishment upon them just for that alone.
Interesting.
In fact, I have to wonder if Isildur even needed to curse them. I mean, well, he needed to curse them in the sense that they needed to be come back around and used as an army. But I wonder if he had not cursed them, might they have become wights, like the Barrow Wights, who, by the way, are also men who are somehow undead or reanimated.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have some time to think about that soon. Yeah, absolutely.
So I have to wonder what would have happened to these men, even had Isildur not cursed them, because they had violated an oath and brought Iluvatar's punishment upon themselves.
That's an interesting thought, because so you're saying basically maybe Isildur's curse bound them to Aragorn, gave them the opportunity to,
to be used for the eucatastrophe
later, but didn't actually lead to the effect of them being trapped in their bodies. That's a cool idea.
It's an interesting thought. I know. I'm not really sure, but it does feel like the kind of thing that would cost them this because of breaking their curse. Remember, they broke their curse because they used to worship Sauron.
Right.
So, then they turn around and say, okay, King, we'll serve you. And then they break their they break their oath.
Right. That's an interesting thought.
Worshiping.
That's an interesting thought. I mean, definitely Isildur's curse had to do something because it's
it must. It absolutely did.
That's a very interesting thought that the curse I don't know. I like that. I like that idea.
Yeah, it's interesting, that's for sure.
It's a great question. I think we'll get to do a lot more with it in a few books. Maybe
Yes, we
sooner.
will.
Maybe sooner. We'll talk about it a
Yeah.
little more when we get to the Barrow Whites.
The Barrow Whites, absolutely.
But yeah, so that was a fun one. Adam did have another question related to the Paths of the Dead and to Baldur.
Oh,
but
Baldur.
But I'm afraid we've gone way long already, and I think that's all we have time for. So we will get to that one as soon as we can, Adam, I promise.
Yep. Well, thank you, Adam and Matt. Now, before we conclude, we have some very big news.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the start of today's episode, you heard Shaun Gunner and I talk about the big, once-in-a-lifetime Tolkien gathering next August in Birmingham, Tolkien 2019. And we're still working out the details with the folks organizing the event, but we are proud to announce that not only will Shaun and I be attending Tolkien 2019, we will be part of the event itself.
I still can't even believe it, when we say it. I know. But it's true. We'll be doing another one of our episodes recorded live with the special guests that will be in attendance at Tolkien 2019. Now, we're not sure we're going to get a chance to speak with everyone.
True.
But just looking at the guest list, the folks that will be there include Tom Shippey, Wayne Hammond, Christina Scull, Alan Lee, Ted Naismith, Brian Sibley, and Dimitri Fimi.
Yeah. I mean, at
That's
least
just
two
who's
of those
been announced so far.
That's right. And we know they're looking for more. So it's going to be amazing. Now, two of those folks have been on the show already, and it is possible, I'm not going to say who, but it's possible that some more might join us before we see them again in Birmingham. And like Shaun said, the Tolkien Society is working on bringing in other guest speakers that we'll have a chance to bring to you, listeners of the Prancing Pony podcast.
And like Alan said earlier, we still don't have all the details. We might need to do our episode in 2 segments instead of 1. We might only have time for some guests and not all. The important thing is we'll be there, and we'll be bringing you along with us.
Absolutely. And as we get more details, we'll be sure to let you know. In the meantime, please try to come to Tolkien 2019 yourselves and look out for new Prancing Pony podcast themed merchandise that we will be offering to help cover our travel costs to Birmingham next year. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony podcast. Please be sure to join us again next week when we start our second 100 episodes by watching Sam wonder if he'll be turned into a newt.
And if he'll get better.
I sure hope so.
Now, thanks again for listening, and thank you for making our common room on Facebook such a fun place to spend time. We want all of you to be a part of this conversation, and it doesn't stop when the episode ends. See the comments, questions, corrections, and more on Facebook at the Prancing Pony Podcast. We're also on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod, and on Instagram at Prancing Pony Pod.
And a very special thank you to our patrons at the Kierdance contribution tier. That's DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Emily in Texas, and Chad in Texas. Thank you all.
And make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast by subscribing to the show through iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
That's right. And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, the crooked and malicious things you'd do if you had the One Ring. Keep them PG, folks, please. Okay. To Bartleman at theprancingponypodcast.com, and we'll try to get them into our next show. Well, however long we've had is still far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time,
farewell, friends.